For the couple of you that are here and new to this, my name is Noor. I'm the director with public nonprofit team at Street Sense. I'm joined by Joe, my colleague, who's also in the same team, and we're working with the town to develop the first ever economic development strategy for Orleans. Economic development, just so we're setting baselines and we know what we're here to do, is really about improving community well-being through policy, programs, capital improvements that will help attract, retain, or expand existing businesses in town. This group here today, I think we're focused on environment and conservation. It's a big topic. When we talk about economic development, there's always a push and pull between growing different sectors or developing new properties. But also making sure we're balancing that with the natural environment and also the built environment that currently exists in town. So we want to make sure that as we develop the first strategic plan, economic development plan for the town, that it considers any concerns that you might have or opportunities you think we should be leveraging in the built environment and the natural environment as well. So that's what we're focused on for this conversation this next hour. I wanted to maybe go around the room for the folks that are new, understanding who you are, your relationship to town, and how that might maybe impact your perspective on this topic that we're discussing here today. So we'll start.
Thank you. Good to be here. I'm Kevin Galligan. I wear a couple of hats. One is a select board member. I'm in my second term. Been around town for a number of decades, and I also wear another hat as a trustee for the Orleans Conservation Trust. So I know quite a bit about their properties, the protection that's occurred over the years, and how everybody should play well together.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'm Michael Herman. I'm a certified organic farmer in South Orleans, and I also am on the select board.
I'm Judith Bruce. I'm an Orleans volunteer, mostly to do with water, but I'm also on the Conservation Commission.
Named Renaud, 5 years as the chair of the Finance Committee, 5.5 years on that committee, and formerly a trustee of the Orleans Conservation Trust and had been a treasurer of that organization at that point in time.
John Meyer, taxpayer and a member of the Orleans Water and Sewer Commission.
Tom O'Connor, resident taxpayer, and been here since 1992, and coming to the Cape since 1970.
Joanna Kiwi, serial volunteer. I have served on the Orleans Cultural Council and also now am chair of the Cultural District. I also work on managing the programming for the old Firehouse Community Center on Main Street. And I am an avid supporter of the Conservation Trust.
Mary Little, longtime resident.
Jake House, my family owns a few summer shops, so I'm involved in that heavily, and also love the waterways that we have here in Orleans. Use them pretty much every day, as much as possible, so it means a lot to me.
Did you say Goose Summit?
Yep.
Yay for your seasonal display on the roof.
Exactly. Thank you.
Fantastic.
It's cold getting up there sometimes.
Yeah. It's a go-to place.
I
when you
appreciate
see
it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Pass it on. We noticed.
Yes.
Great. So I'm hearing a lot of conservation trust folks, or at least supporters of the conservation trust here. Conservation Commission, a farmer, user of the waterways. So we have a bit of different perspectives here at the table. I just want to start with understanding what locals are most proud of in the local environment, whether that be your beaches, your ponds, your lakes, your water access, or your green parks and open spaces. I just want to understand, going around the table, what to you is probably what you're most proud of in locally.
So you're looking directly at me.
I guess we're going to go. Let's go this way, and then we'll go back that way.
I'll share this view, and this is not analytical in any way. It's just a quick and dirty. I pulled the assessor records for town-owned parcels. And what I'm most proud of is this chart that shows how well balanced we are between the little amount of town buildings, which is a really small part of the pie, but the big amount, like 500 acres to beaches, 500 acres of watershed protection for our environment, and then about 600 acres that are town landings, access points to the water, open space. But all the things really, to me, that I'm really proud of is how it's a balance. It all works together. So, and you may have that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is our beaches.
Beaches.
That's where I grew up spending my time and enjoyed, but I've learned a lot more about our
I'm sorry, I
different-
can't hear you.
our beaches,
Okay,
and
thank
then
you.
I've learned a lot more about our ponds and estuaries in recent times. And I grew up learning how to swim in the ponds, taking swimming classes and things like that. So it's really all of the different paths. I mean, that's the gem we have as this town. We have access to so many varied natural resources.
Right.
Thank you. So, I would have to say there are so many things to be proud of in this town, but I think primarily for me, it's all of our waters. Our beaches, our marshes, our streams, our salt ponds, our fresh ponds. All of it together in aggregate, it is what supports all of our wildlife, which makes this place just absolutely awesome. I think it's the heart of our economy, and it's absolutely, to me, our heartbeat. It's our quality of life here in town. It's what people come for, our waters.
Correct.
Oh my God, right. Yeah, it's hard to add anything new and different to that.
Okay,
so-
so maybe does anyone
Why
else
not
have
waste time, yeah.
something different other than we've heard varied natural resources, balance between the built and the natural, and the waters, whether it, all of the different waters, right, beaches, marshes,
You
streams.
know what, the one other thing to add is the concerted effort of so many and all, and getting it cleaner.
Mm.
The plan to keep it cleaner, work on being cleaner, and, yeah, efforts, so many, the volunteers as well as the taxpayer paid for efforts and so on to clean it up.
The
And you could just say the
Orleans,
natural beauty
Yeah.
of the area.
the Orleans Pond Coalition, if that wasn't mentioned, worked, their entire charge is to keep the waters clean.
The incredible biodiversity
Mm.
that we got is
Oh,
just crazy.
absolutely. Yeah.
Especially, I mean, Town Cove is just loaded with stuff.
I think
And or-
overall would be just the protection that the town has of our natural resources, whether it be the water or even the wetlands. I live on the wetlands, and I grew up in the Bronx, and when I would think of seeing animals, I would go to the Bronx Zoo.
Me too.
Now when I think of animals, I look out my back window.
It's great.
I think that's a phenomenal credit to the village of Orleans and how they're protecting the wetlands.
But just in terms of the biodiversity, Town Cove, I used to fish Town Cove in the late 60s.
Oh, it's going
And in
down.
half an hour,
It's
you'd get
going
a
down.
bucket of flounder and eel.
Oh,
Yeah.
How long has it been? And you couldn't take a powerboat out in Town Cove
Yeah.
because of the eelgrass.
Yesterday.
How
didn't
long has
help.
it been since we've had
Yeah.
eelgrass
And
in
East
Town
End doesn't
Cove
help
or
much.
eel?
No, it didn't.
No,
Or
one
flounder.
bit. That's my biggest fear why I'm here, is because East Town, like, you don't dredge Town Cove, it's already causing a monumental effort. I'm on it every single day. You can see, like, die off every year.
Yeah.
There's no pogies, no bunker coming in.
Right.
They didn't come in this year as thick as they have done just 2 years ago. The striped bass population in there, it's all right, but they don't come past the hole in the wall.
Yeah.
Not sure you're familiar with that area.
Yeah.
They don't come in past that anymore just because of lack of oxygen.
Yeah.
I do volunteer with the town for water testing, like
Mm.
sampling. We volunteer a boat on that frequently, and
20 years going.
it's very, very sad when
And
I
not
think we test 3
just
spots.
a boat, but they do 3 stations.
Yeah,
Town folks.
yeah. So
Thank you.
it's just scary when they pull it up and they're like, there's no oxygen down there, like near the yacht club, and that's very scary.
I think that's the thing that is the undercurrent, is the concern of degradation. And, you know, although it's great to, you know, I'll just tell a quick story. You can look at my iPhone, I record, it's usually between March 17th and April 17th, because we have a cranberry bog. The first peepers, I run out the door and I record them, because, you know, we have this wonderful nature like right out our back door, but the degradation and the concerns of what's to come are really something that we've got to make sure is in balance. Back to the word balance as to how much we keep investing in building and need to take care of the natural environment.
So can you share a little bit about the factors that are leading to the overall degradation?
There's no water flow, so there's a huge reason they need to dredge it. It falls on what death is, for sure. Not just for the water, but also the recreation to get out there. Like, I'm lucky I got an 18-foot boat that drafts 0 inches. I never get stuck, but we've all seen people stuck on the way out to Town Cove. That can be solved. Better flow is going to lead to more oxygen in the water, a lot more stuff moving around for sure.
I don't live on Town Cove, but I live on the Mill Pond, and we have a similar problem on the Mill Pond. I used to go out and get mussels right out of the grass on the side. There aren't any mussels there anymore. And we've been here for 20-odd years, more than that. And Judith and I have been working for many, many years on trying to get sewers into this town, and we finally have sewers going into the town.
Should make a
And-
huge difference for Town Cove, and hopefully soon, because, yeah, the
And
underlying
many waterways.
degradation is wastewater. It's
Yeah.
all of us.
Oh, that
It's all the septic systems that
septic
just flush
systems.
over and over, and all of it washes into the waters.
that huge pipe that comes from Stop and Shop. I've seen that some days, and that is the nastiest color in the world.
Oh, my
You wouldn't
God.
even want to see that, and you wouldn't even see it in the Bronx. It's like
I thought there was an
disgusting.
agreement for that to be pumped every week.
It's a system,
Yeah.
but it's not
And for
ideal.
example, too, like blue crabs, they've just started coming back up. Like, we had a good year of blue crabs hanging out on the dock. And then once they started doing that road work there, they were pumped in fresh water into it.
Dewatering.
In less than a week, those blue crabs everywhere dead. Everywhere dead.
Yikes.
And that's sad, because I haven't seen blue crabs in the last 5 years in Town Cove that thick.
No one's mentioned the rail trail as an asset or something that's important to the local environment. Is that
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
the rail trail? No one's mentioned that. Not even in our last 2 focus groups, we talked
Oh,
about
we did it at the
assets.
end. We
I
did
brought
Did it at
We
the
did.
end.
Nobody brought
In-
it up.
in
I'm
privacy.
an avid biker, and I use it all the time.
I think we all take it
And-
for granted.
We do, I
What's
just,
that?
We take it for granted. It's
We
probably
do
not
take it for
mentioned
granted,
because
yeah.
it's just part of our fabric.
can I add to that though?
Certainly.
The rail trail where it crosses Main Street is the scariest part of Orleans.
I said that
It's the
earlier.
In the
scariest.
summer especially.
I mean, really, when they really, because the town, how does it work? We own it, the state maintains it, I believe. But when they really converted that, because I go back a few years, from rail to a, multimodal use, they should have really designed either a underground or a ramp system over. Because when the rail trail comes, you've got stoplights, you've got a really quirky intersection with Old Colony Way. It is the most unsafe area of this town.
As a user, I would say Millstone Road is even worse.
That's true too, yeah.
That's in Brewster.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, because it's on a curve.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, sightline.
And because people are driving like crazy on Millstone Road.
Right.
But from a standpoint of development opportunities, any way that we could take state funds and other funds, federal funds, and really improve that. And I mean that intersection. And I'm talking serious, not just some, paint and, lights.
They're there already. The paint and lights are there already.
Yep.
Well,
Is it worse when you have the break in the trail
Yeah.
going over the highway? From Old
Yeah,
Colony over the highway to that other piece?
Yeah.
Is that,
That's
you're
serious,
riding
too.
right on the road over
Yeah.
the bridge?
Oh, on West Road?
Yeah, West Road, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh, West Road, yeah.
Right.
So who are the major players in terms of I mean, obviously the Conservation Trust and the Conservation Commission are two big players who are folks that are advocating for all of these improvements and changes. Are there others?
Orleans Pond Coalition.
Orleans Pond Coalition.
In Marine Freshwater Committee,
Yeah.
Are these committees for the town?
the
Yeah.
town committee,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, the Pond Coalition is private, as
Right.
is the Conservation Trust. The others are town.
Are there others that should be more concerned about these issues that maybe are not communicating with these groups that are at the table, or?
I think there's pretty good communication between municipal and private. That would be my perspective. Others might have a different perspective.
At the last meeting, my comment was lack of communication. I think, I agree with you, Judith, in this regard. The communication, I think, is very good.
It's open
Oh,
space.
in this instance?
Yeah,
Okay.
open
The
space.
Open
Space Committee.
Open space.
And I'm glad that two select people are here, because my point was money. We need money. Volunteer, people don't want to volunteer
Taking
anymore.
donations.
So we need money to employ people to do this stuff,
Yeah.
to communicate.
Because
Thank
a
you.
huge issue is, and jump right
Yeah,
in,
go ahead.
but a huge issue is the town gets real enthusiastic, the taxpayers, the voters, about buying green space, but we don't always remember the funding for the maintenance, the
Correct, yeah.
ongoing. So we end up with invasives. We end up, the purchase might include, oh, but we need trails and we need parking.
Mhm, mhm.
But then the maintenance of the trails, the parking, and the invasives, and all the invasive species hear about, oh, we're gonna go, and then so all the kudzu and the Japanese knotweed and everybody else starts arriving in trucks, you know, they come, they bring their family members with them, and the next thing you know, it's all up in the trees and so on, because the town doesn't have the funding to pay for the getting rid of the invasive.
Are all the groups that we've mentioned here voluntary groups? All of them?
Well, so there are two nonprofit volunteer groups, Orleans Conservation Trust and the Orleans Pond Coalition. The other committees mentioned
Mhm.
are municipal committees.
Right.
They're
But-
town committees.
But they're volunteers.
They're volunteers.
They still are
volunteers.
volunteers.
Yes.
They're
But
volunteers.
Lynn is 100% correct.
Yeah.
Maintenance is a big, big problem. My wife is involved in the Orleans Improvement Association, which makes improvements downtown and in Orleans in general, but there's no money for maintenance, and it's my big complaint all the time. And the town itself has a lot of employees involved in maintenance, and they do a great job, wonderful job. And
Just need more of them.
That we do need more of them. And, you know, when you look at the acreage of town parcels, both for buildings as well as the environment, if you look at the staff, how could they possibly maintain this with this
I think
current
we had
structure?
AmeriCorps come in a
That's a
number of
great
years, and
resource.
that's like a group of 15 dedicated to a particular task.
And they do group work projects, they do individual assignments. If you're not familiar with
Mhm.
AmeriCorps Cape Cod, awesome organization.
But then when you end up with a weather event,
They all get
trees come
pulled.
down on all the trails, whether it's an
Mhm.
OCT property or town
Town.
property, then it just adds to the burden of
Mhm.
clearing the trails and making them reusable again, to make them safe again. When you've got trees down or partly down over a trail, you have to go walk the trails and see whether they're safe to walk.
So there are sections of the trail that the town manages and maintains, or
Oh, there's trails all over the
Yeah.
place on all these.
Totally.
not the rail trail.
not the
No.
real
No,
trail?
sorry, not
That's
the rail.
DCR.
Yeah, but if you go to Powwow Pond, there's a nice, very short, convenient trail, but as Lynn said, you know, in a storm, you could have a tree down, and, you know, in a way, I'm thinking, because I know the utilities do it, we all pay in our rates for them to do preventive maintenance, like they are tree trimming, or they try to.
On Ponset today.
Right, but they, you know, we should learn from that too, and not just go and clean the broken branch down or tree, but assess our properties on an ongoing basis, and put some money into making sure that the locust that's gonna fall in another month you get it before it falls. You do proactive
So
approaches.
the
I'm looking for firewood.
The town does do some of that. On town properties, each of the town properties has a steward on the Conservation
Right.
Commission. We all walk those trails periodically, and we turn in a report to the Conservation Department. In turn, they arrange with DPW to do cleanup and maintenance. It's far from a perfect system.
Yeah.
You never really, it's good to say, to determine which one of these trees is coming down. Honestly, the one you identify as down the next storm
Yeah.
is still up a decade from now, and the
Yeah.
one next to it is down, and you never saw it coming. So it's
Who's
hard.
the best one here to talk about the farms, the
Putnam Farm,
the Putnam, Shecall, and
And
Hopkins, and
Hopkins.
especially about here's what may be coming on Putnam, and the money that could be spent on
Yeah.
Putnam, just to provide input to this discussion.
So the Conservation Commission manages those properties. We've got management plans for them.
So I know about these things, but
Right.
I'm not the vote.
Yeah,
So-
no,
Loaded
so, Michael, you involved with that particularly?
The ag committee, but
Druzy Henson is on the Conservation Commission, and she's most involved in it directly. But the Conservation Commission has been working with a group of the farmers at Putnam, as well as Seacall and
Are
the farm.
are you referring to the Conservation Department of the town?
So the
Or a commission
Conservation,
that's separate from
the
that?
Conservation Commission is the regulatory body under the Department of the Conservation Department. So the commission, our staff person, quote, our paid person, is John Janelle, who is the conservation administrator for the town. And he in turn has a clerical person who helps with the commission as well. So we hold management plans for all of the properties of the town. And then John and the Conservation Department does not have people to maintain and manage these lands that we oversee. So that's then DPW. So we turn to DPW, and there's some financial arrangements, don't ask.
A lot of begging.
A lot of begging, and there's some money that gets transferred from here to there. But basically, DPW is very supportive, and when John lets them know that something is needed on a particular property, they get out there and they get it done. And again, that depends on what time of year. I mean, it's a whole lot harder to get DPW time in the middle of summer when they're managing beaches and doing everything else that Public Works does than in December, when fortunately they have a little more time.
The added layer onto this is, so Judith has got kind of the status of where it is now, but we also have a very well-funded, thanks in part because Orleans accepted the Community Preservation Act, so we have a very active set of projects that come in every year. This year, in fact, Putnam, which is this farm, and again, a dial back, that parcel was acquired as open space under the control of the Conservation Commission. But then, as the farm has now gotten some more volunteers, enthusiasm, and energy, they put together an application to get a well placed, expand the growing area, and it's going to really over time build out because it's, I don't know how many acres the whole
13.
area is.
I think it's 13.
14.
Oh,
Yeah.
26.
And
26, I believe.
and what's in grow is
Total.
less than, I think, 2 acres now of
Yeah.
production. So there's a lot of potential.
Are there
it's
institutions in the region that should be partners in this? We've seen other models in upstate New York and other parts of the Commonwealth that there are agricultural and institutions that have staff in place who are interested on the research side, but also do the day-to-day management tasks as well. So are there, whether it be universities or research institutions in the region, it doesn't necessarily have to be in Lower Cape, somewhere in the Cape that might be
Through
in
the county,
county?
we connect to the UMass Extension Service. So
Okay.
they have soil conservation folks, they have, people all involved in bees and butterflies, and so we're very much aligned with any support that Barnstable County, including the Cape Cod Commission. They do a lot of data analysis, but also on the list of committees is the Ag Council. We also have an agricultural commission. So they're very involved in Putnam
Yeah,
and,
that's all right.
yeah.
Yeah.
The volunteers just keep thinking they're,
And they're volunteers.
yeah, they're a town committee.
But it's not like an army of
Mm-mm.
people to do work.
Yeah.
It's advisory capacity.
Right.
But not.
That's advice, it's not hands-on work.
Right.
Remember,
Right.
we started with maintenance and lack thereof.
And I was gonna say,
Still true, didn't change.
as John mentioned before, fewer and fewer people are willing to volunteer. It
Absolutely.
used to be you moved to town, retired, and jumped in and volunteered for 50 different things.
Mhm.
Now it's like pulling teeth. People just are not doing the volunteerism that they used to. Which, when I mentioned Goose Hummock offering their boat and taking volunteers out to
thank you.
sample 3 stations,
That's a rough
the
one.
town samples 40 estuary stations 5 times a summer. We used to have no problem having a different team of a boat and 2 or 3 volunteers for every single station.
Is that a COVID thing, Judy?
No, I don't think it is,
Mm.
and I'm not sure why the problem has been more Town Cove than it has Pleasant Bay and Cape Cod Bay. We did okay, we got all the stations covered just like that for Pleasant Bay this year. Town Cove, we had, Goose Hummock did 3 all
I
summer.
think it has something to do with
Another,
navigation.
Yeah,
another
exactly.
team did
Gotta-
4
gotta
stations.
know it.
We just couldn't get the volunteers set up, we had to skip 2 stations in the Nauset Estuary system.
Should've told me.
Because we,
I've done it. I'm telling you, another place like back of my hand.
How-
That's the thing that.
I
all
love
right,
that.
don't ever say that, but we'll be calling you next year.
I'll do it.
Awesome.
How are
But you
these?
know, that didn't used to happen, so the,
But I think another important thing is the contributions that the businesses in this town do
Oh, it's huge.
and how they help out
oh,
Right here.
absolutely.
all of the volunteer.
Perfect
Yeah, so
example.
sometimes it's 7 a.m. on a Saturday, I've been out on Friday, so we gotta go.
Yep.
We're there.
And I think they
Good
work
time.
well together for the
Totally.
most part. I mean, the
Yes, they do.
nonprofits, the businesses, the town, they all come together to get stuff done.
It's very important.
Yeah, it's
My wife
huge.
and I had our own business and we were always very supportive. We didn't buy on the internet, we bought in town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it too has to come with communication.
I was
Yeah,
gonna.
like, well, just the
yeah.
volunteering, like,
There you
like,
go.
I don't know when to volunteer.
There you go. Now you learned
volunteer, know what I'm
something
saying?
today.
There's a lot of people that I think would,
Is-
and businesses that would, but they're not being outreached to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not being outreached in the right way. There could be a different way to approach it.
How is it currently being marketed, these opportunities? Like when you need help, when
So-
the trust needs help, you know, like who,
My dad
where
tells me
does
I gotta
it
go
come
help him.
So,
Your dad's, okay, your dad's the
There
go-to.
we go. I'm gonna go do it.
So the sampling gets set up through the town and typically usually through the Marine and Freshwater Quality Committee of the town. So I'm on that committee, and this past year I did all the coordinating for the freshwater ponds and the estuaries ponds. So I also used the Pond Coalition with email blasts coming out of the Pond Coalition, as well as going to select board meetings and saying,
Mhm.
hey, we need your help. I don't think we ever put anything in the newspaper, but I'm trying to remember if we did this year.
I don't
So
think so either.
we looked back on it and said, okay, where did we do well, where didn't we do well? And I think one of our biggest problems, this is a program that's combined with 4 other towns. And so we need to set everything up with Chatham, Harwich, Brewster, and Orleans together. The individual who heads up the monitoring program is very resistant to selecting the dates until May. It's too late, and I can't convince him that waiting, well, I can't say, I've been so far unable to convince him that waiting until May is too late. People set up their plans for the summer, they have family coming, they do their traveling. They need those 5 dates. We need to be able to lock those in January, February. And I think if we can do that, we'll have more luck recruiting more of the volunteers and folks that we need. I think.
Judith, can you briefly explain to our consultants here why a bunch of towns are involved?
So Pleasant Bay is a 4 municipal watershed. I mean, it is a very large water body. It's the largest estuary on Cape Cod. It is managed by the Pleasant Bay Alliance, which is a municipal organization of 4 towns. And actually, it is the only, I believe, the only wastewater permit that is held for a watershed rather than a town in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So it is the Pleasant Bay Alliance that holds the watershed, the wastewater permit for Pleasant Bay. And all 4 towns must get together and decide who's doing what and who's responsible for how much nitrogen removal and what approaches are they going to use. There's a plan that gets updated every 5 years. It's all coordinated among these 4 towns. The management of Pleasant Bay has been coordinated among 5 towns since it was made an area of critical environmental concern in the 80s.
Right.
So this has been a very long time that the 4 towns have worked together. It means the harbor masters work together having similar regulations. So, you know, you don't have something where somebody crosses over a line from Orleans into Harwich and suddenly there's a whole different set of regulations. It works fairly well, but it's not streamlined.
What do you mean by not streamlined?
Well, you know, think about how many things you go through working with one town, and now multiply that by 4.
Got it.
So you've got 4 select boards, you have 4 structures of committees, you have 4 harbor masters, you have 4 natural resource officers. You've got 4 of everything. And so all of those get coordinated, consulted. You have to get everybody to agree. We Cape Codders are famous for our independence
Opinions?
Yes.
and opinions. You know,
Is there
we work nicely with others, but we have very strong opinions as to what it is we should be doing.
Is the regulatory framework an issue at all? And everything that she's just described, you know, going through the
In
4
town
towns.
code?
Yeah.
I would have no idea.
Yeah.
I
So
just use it.
for Town Cove, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's just
Well,
That
for
goes right
Pleasant
out
Bay,
to-
do
It's
you
not
have,
the
does
same.
anyone
Even
know?
though
It's
East
not
Ham
the
is
same.
Yeah, it's different.
a long time
body.
ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone here have experience with navigating
Oh, yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that Eastham Orleans works well in terms of harbor master relationships
Oh,
and natural
yeah.
resources.
That's
There
fine.
is not a formal structure or regulatory entity that oversees that, but I do think that there's good coordination.
Eastham?
Yeah.
You would know
I
better.
mean, the
than
harbor
that.
masters this year were they were a young crew, so they were a little aggressive. But it's all right. It's all right, we'll let it slide.
There, you were gonna
It's
say.
gonna-
Well, it just,
Politician.
in the town code system, which is completely different from Pleasant Bay. I mean, you should know Orleans was a village of Eastham way back in the beginning, so.
And they've
there's-
never forgotten it.
Yeah,
They
But-
sure happen.
but
It always happens.
But from a standpoint of a shared resource, which this is, I mean, we have symmetrical relationships, so that if somebody gets a permit in Orleans, they have rights to use in the body of water. If someone gets a permit in Eastham, they can get, and then from buoys and navigation, there's a close coordination as to who does what. And again, the beauty of the Pleasant Bay Alliance is, you know, it avoids the talk about a town boundary. It looks at it as a system because that is the resource. It shouldn't worry about, you know, the rock that's here and it's like everything over there is yours. I mean, we really work together and we
The
should.
fish and.
But paying for dredging is another story.
We're not going there today.
The fish and water
No, I
have no
mean,
idea,
it's
they
not
just
all-
crossed over into a
Yeah, it's
different
not all
town.
rosy. Yeah.
Rosie.
It's not all
Yeah,
rosy.
not at all.
Right.
No, it won't be.
Okay.
It's gonna be tragic.
So we talked a little bit about the risk in not addressing, you know, the dredging needed. What other key environmental challenges that might be facing town that we haven't touched on yet that might impact either local residents or business owners?
Freshwater ponds.
Well, when you say, what do you mean environmental? What are you?
In different places, it means different things. So, for example, water, septic, I think, has been addressed in town, right? That's one thing that businesses are going to benefit from, having a new system in place.
In the downtown,
In the-
yeah.
Oh,
In the downtown.
so
It's
that's
just-
not.
only down
Oh,
now.
Saltwater estuaries only.
That's just
And saltwater
phase
only.
1. We have a long way to go.
So just village center.
Yes.
Just village center, so.
yeah.
Next, hopefully, will be Meeting House Pond.
which is the East Orleans section of town.
Next, hopefully, will be freshwater ponds,
Right.
but yes, I would jump onto that with John. Our freshwater ponds are,
Yeah.
so far, we have 3 really good recreational lakes, freshwater, Pilgrim, Crystal, and Baker's. Baker's is starting to deteriorate, but hanging in, doing pretty well. Pilgrim and Crystal are showing real signs of degradation. And in this day and age, with climate change and things getting warmer, once you get cyanobacteria settled into a freshwater lake or pond, I don't want to say you can kiss it goodbye, but it's really hard to pull it back from there. And so that's death to dogs, that's illness to people, that's closing down your freshwater resources for recreation, for swimming, for kayaking, for paddleboarding. What starts as something wonderful for everyone becomes a health hazard to the entire community.
And I would say, from a standpoint of environment conservation, that plugs so well in, particularly these 3 beautiful bodies of water. One of them is a really deep, deep pond back to the glacier. You swam in. That's where the Orleans Rec Department, in combination with DPW, used to always run a very aggressive swimming program. And many people in these ponds learned. And now you got to go off of, Nassau Marine East out into Meeting House if you want to swim.
I go to Wellfleet.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Way back in
I
the
wish we
process.
could bring that
Way
back,
in the
but it's the health of the ponds that are concerned.
One thing we haven't brought up is that Orleans really is a leader in wastewater
Mhm.
on the entire Cape. I mean, we've spent so much money on research that no other town has spent, or
Especially alternatives.
Yeah, the alternative.
alternatives, Lynn, yes. And I think it's something that we can be very proud of, and it's been costly.
It does tie into the environmental measures that we've advanced, because folks said, do we want to spend 300 million, or do we want to pause and look at all the different options that might be quicker to solve the problem and cheaper?
And see, Chatham went ahead, they were a bit ahead of us in just sewering, just straight sewering.
The entire town.
Yeah.
And to Kevin's point, and John's, part of what Orleans has been doing is looking at some alternatives, permeable reactive barriers, as well as oyster
Agriculture,
farming,
yeah.
my word,
Yeah.
in Monty's Pond and so on, looking to see how effective these technologies,
Mhm.
alternate technologies
Right.
were in solving the nitrogen problem.
Yeah.
And so on. So, again, leader not just on the Cave, but statewide, perhaps elsewhere. So,
And that's because we got such a good natural resource for the business.
Exactly.
It comes right back to it.
Yeah.
Recreation businesses all run off of Nauset Beach.
and
Town
these should
Cove,
take time,
right.
because the state requires you, and in some cases, to have like 3 years of, I'll use the word experiment, to see whether it's working.
Mhm.
And then they'll decide whether it's a viable solution. So it's not like you can try something in your lab and say, well, that seems to work.
You don't
And then
flip
they
the switch,
okay it and they'll
yeah.
fund it. No, it takes much
Yeah.
longer.
And even at that, if it doesn't work, you have to go back to the original
Yeah.
system.
Yeah, and sewer the town.
Who's leading these experiments?
Pardon?
Who's been leading these new alternative systems and testing and experimenting with all of the different technologies?
Select board.
The select board?
Right now, I mean, it started with a consensus-based approach with volunteers in a room that evaluated this, because where we were going was not getting us anywhere. So we pretty much all got in the room and said, we're going to work together, meet every week if possible to get through this. And we did. We came out with a consensus plan that was pretty much agreed to, and now it's in implementation mode.
Kevin, one thing we haven't discussed is OQUAP. Orleans
Yeah, that's the
Water quality.
consensus.
Water Quality Advisory Panel.
Right.
And I was a member,
Yep.
Lynn was a member,
Yeah.
Judith was a member, and
Yeah.
Kevin was a member. And we met once a week. Was it once a week? Yeah. For I don't know how many hours.
Sometimes even more.
And to come to a consensus.
Often pronounced OQUAP.
OQUAP.
Rhymes with what? Yeah.
One thing too, I'm sure you've seen it in not only other communities you work in, but the other panels you've talked to. I continue to be amazed at, just the quality of contributions from all of our folks. I mean, people are so dedicated in this community. You know, look at Lynn, I mean, she does research so that when she brings a topic up at Finance Committee, they have good, accurate information. You know, the same with your Conservation Commission. You know, you ask applicants to really take into account, you know, not only your regulations, but how it can benefit the environment overall. So we have a very, I'd say, a high level of commitment to our environment, just in the fact of the people that you see. I mean, just, I put a range of between 1 and 10, you know, in terms of that commitment, as high as 10. You know, it's just really amazing. And you see other communities where, you know, you go to a meeting, and I'm not mentioning another outer Cape Town, but one nearby, you don't see anywhere near the contribution. It's like, what do you want us to do? Vote, done. And there's no careful consideration of things. And I see in our town we do.
200 out of 7,000.
Yeah, well, another topic altogether, though, that probably fits in this session is climate change.
I was just gonna
And
go there.
The risk and so on. So a couple things there. There are meetings, there have been studies, there's a Cape Cod Commission involvement, looking at low-lying roads and so on. So, and the impacts, there was a workshop, 18 months ago or thereabouts, where we were looking at potential impacts of these types of things. So, yes, we are alert and aware. No, we haven't solved. We were a victim of, when was that, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we lost half of the beach at Nauset Beach and had to really move quickly to save some things and save money as well. But yeah, we know, we understand, and we realize that in time there are things that are jeopardized. Rock Harbor itself, the Council on Aging is in a floodplain, and at some point in time, very likely will have to be somewhere else.
Rock Harbor Road's gonna go underwater
It is.
often.
Yeah.
Again, that's one of the low-lying roads. So, again, the climate change impact is on our list, the town's list, if you will, of risks and issues.
And when we're rebuilding the access to Nauset Beach because of climate change, because of sea rise, and we spent, I don't know.
That wasn't your foot, I thought it was, it's a roller. That's next to
It's all right, I haven't had a
roller.
But anyway, they're redoing the entrance to Nauset Beach parking lot. We spent, I don't know how many $1 million reducing the amount of parking there by putting in a new dune. And it's a man-constructed dune, and so far it's all held.
It has.
And, but it's
amazing.
inevitable.
How is the visitor economy impacting the local environment, whether good or bad? I want to hear your thoughts on the impact that the visitors and your seasonal traffic
If
is
we
having.
lose Nauset Beach, and that's a huge destination for many of our visitors, whoops. It's like Paris losing the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It'll be rebuilt.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you know, that's a huge draw, the concept of the ocean beach.
Yeah.
Skake's a lovely beach, it ain't the ocean beach.
Right.
So,
Well, I think that Nauset Beach will be rebuilt, just like Nauset Light or Coast Guard Beach. They were all rebuilt. I really feel that we're not going to let that go down.
my point, agreed,
You know?
yeah.
But as far as the
Visitors,
they
they will also contribute to wastewater, clearly. I mean,
They're
The
paying for it.
visitors,
They're paying for part of it
the
anyway.
visitors are our economy.
Yeah.
And we have to maintain our environment or we're not gonna get the visitors.
Right.
So we need the visitors.
Is there a concern about the high levels of visitation? And, you know, we've worked in communities where, you know, the conservation impact is really important to a community, and they've made strides in policies to either limit daily activity or making sure that their trails or their areas have very specific rules in which users have to follow. Is that something that's of concern?
So way back in the early days, we had the summer people that would come and visit, You know, they would set up for a couple months, you know, grow on their farm, make jellies and jams at Seacole Farm, and it was a wonderful thing. All that changed because of highways, because of wealth and all that stuff. So yeah, we have to manage the enjoyment of our space for our residents in balance with the visitors that we love. We love them to come and spend their money.
Yeah.
But so to that point, the select board, in concert with the traffic study committee, the police, the natural resources, have made a beginning on just designating a few town landings, have sections for residents only, using a sticker system. So we're making inroads to try to be sure that if somebody wants to get down River Road, pop the kayak in, they won't see a blackout of, you know,
Boat
Connecticut,
trailers.
New Jersey, and
Yeah.
where do I go? You know, so we're trying to make sure that we respect our residents' use of our natural resources, but not to the detriment of, I'll be frank, pissing off all the visitors, because we need them. We want them to shop at Goose Hummock and buy a kayak, you know?
It's
Do you
I would
guys-
say we welcome visitors.
We do,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we really
I would say
do.
the visitors too, a lot of them respect it because they come to this place with natural
Exactly.
beauty.
Yeah.
They don't, you know, they're not tossing stuff around. Obviously, there's outliers, there's people that leave the crap everywhere.
Yeah, well
It
said.
happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But I would say the majority of people respect it very well
Yeah.
and love it.
Yeah.
I would say Town Cove especially this year, a lot of new boat owners.
Mhm.
So definitely saw, you know, there's a little bit more detrimental to Town Cove where it was like
Yeah.
lower unit oil leaks.
Mm.
Just accidental spills or running aground and then ripping off the whole bottom.
Oh,
So
Yikes.
clams, your
Oh.
mussels are gone, like that's kind of another thing that is to think about, but you don't really see it that much.
So in the short time we have left, we haven't talked about sharks.
Oh, yes, please.
So there was a big concern about when the sharks started to
Yeah, good point, yeah.
rear their heads, about how it would destroy our economy, our tourist economy, and I think it's made it stronger,
Yeah,
actually.
exactly.
People come for the sharks.
Yeah. Provided we put in the right,
Yeah,
Measures.
safety.
Yeah,
exactly,
safety.
safety, because we have invested in, you know, first aid boxes staggered across the beach.
Still
training
phone
signs.
lines.
So I
Shark
think we
buoys.
talk
Exactly.
about some of the, maybe limiting or looking at some expansion and increase. I think it depends on what kind of expansion and increase. So if we started allowing huge hotels and motels, bringing in thousands of additional people, if we added lanes to Route 6, I know there's big talk about more bridges and more lanes bringing people over. There's a recognition that this is a tiny little spit of sand sitting out into the ocean, and it can't be expanded. I mean, it is what it is. And so if you keep on putting huge additional numbers of people onto this area, you're not going to have the natural resources that in fact are drawing the people. So that's part of the balance. I mean, you don't want to be so reactionary that you say nothing can expand, we're never going to try or look at new things. But the other side of it is, let's be a little bit cautious about how much and what kind of infrastructure we put in place that in turn enables a level of visitation that we can't manage.
We haven't talked about the impact of zoning. Zoning has been planned out here in Orleans, and it helps a lot in controlling the impacts that Judith was talking about. And so I think that we have zoning in place that will not permit hotels, motels, high-rise buildings, and so on and so
Vulnerable
forth.
businesses.
There are limits on land use.
Yeah. Well, we have just a few more minutes here. We want to talk about, as we think about strategies and recommendations to address some of these challenges you've mentioned today, are there aspirational or best-in-class destinations very similar to Orleans that we should be looking at as we think about case studies or best practices? I'm sure in your research and in developing some of these alternative technologies, you've come across other communities that face similar challenges to yourself that maybe have made more advanced steps in addressing these.
I mean, it's not even in our topic, it might be for the next group that's coming in, but particularly, we have a housing crisis overall for low-income,
Yeah.
moderate workforce, but another really important one is the summer visiting students that have no place to live. They literally fly in from Bulgaria, they get dropped off at the bus station with no place to
Yeah,
live.
exactly.
So we need barracks, we need, you know, so again, it's
Seasonal
not,
housing.
yeah, yeah. We're not in environmental conservation, but, you know,
Right.
I'm the optimist that says maybe the next land acquisition could actually be a marriage between seasonal housing, year-round housing, and some open space. You know, that it'd be a great example to set. So if there are any world-class, best-in-class examples of how you combine, you know, protection of your environment with housing projects, particularly seasonal housing needs, that would be wonderful.
We also need to educate those students coming not to ride their bikes at night, and they got waitress server clothes, and you can't see
Black,
them.
all black.
It's all black.
Oh, yeah.
They're riding their bikes, they're on their phones,
I love it.
and you cannot see them.
And
And no helmets.
I think from a positive standpoint, a number of the businesses have given foreign employees bicycle lights
Yeah.
and so on, and
Yeah, I
helmets.
remember that.
And I think that, you know, that's a donation that has been given that improves safety.
Yes, it does.
Our community police force too are very nice. They will, you know, stop, not trying to pull them over, but say, hey, you know, here's a light. And sometimes when they're partying, they'll also help them out, take them home, you know? They can get wildly crazy.
Any aspirational communities we should be looking to?
Gotta look after that cove.
Mm-hmm.
There's the young one in here, you gotta look after that cove.
Okay.
It scares the
That's a good point.
We hear it loud and clear. Well, thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
joining us for this group. Our next one is commercial real estate, so if you do want to stay, you're happy to stay, but I feel like maybe we'll have different opinions in that group. The meetings are all going to be recorded, so they will be made available on the town
Oh, I live on
website.
156
If
to
you're
Melrose.
interested in listening in on any of those. So